Hello and welcome to the Ebbenflow podcast, episode 18. My name is Ben, and this is different. This is a change. Um, I've been trying to release every Thursday since I started this podcast, but I I didn't release on Thursday this week because there's just a lot of change. As per my previous podcast, which was in my apartment. That was for sure the last one that I was doing in that apartment because I moved to my parents' house the next couple days after that. That was recorded on a Friday, and then I moved to my parents on Sunday. And I have been living with my parents for 2 weeks now, almost 2 weeks. And next week, I will leave for California to go on vacation with my parents. We're going to San Francisco for a little bit, then Napa Valley for a couple days, and then Lake Tahoe and Yosemite National Park for a nice family vacation. But afterwards, my parents will be flying back to Philadelphia, and I am going to be staying in California um, because I have a remote job and I can do that. Um, it's it's interesting uh, what kind of change this is reflective of in my life. I've generally stayed in the same spot for my entire life, um, living in the East Coast and I've never been to the West Coast before. Um, and it's traveling is something that I've come to love, and the next expression of my travel will be on the West Coast. Um, Last year in my life, I did a lot of traveling. I went to many, many places: Costa Rica, Netherlands, Lost Lands, Electric Forest, Ultra. Um, did a lot of events, and honestly, it was awesome. It was a great time last year, but some financial situations changed in my life, and then I just didn't travel as much this year, um, which is fine because I got to kind of focus on other things. I feel like traveling was a big focus last year, but this year it's this podcast. It's the business that I've kind of taken a break from. Um, what I have been spending a lot of time on is making music, which is fucking dope. Uh, Making music is something that I've always wanted to do, but never maybe had the faith in myself, the time, and the resources, and then maybe just the drive. The timing never lined up. Um, but the music I've always wanted to make, maybe you can guess, is EDM. And in my life, I listen to so much of it, and I get so inspired by all the awesome sounds and the rhythms and the grooves that just make me want to dance for several hours and just wonder, like, how can I do this? And it's always been DJing was always been the closest outlet I had to that. Um, Ever since college, I've I've always wanted to like be in control of the music and the vibes at like social gatherings. Um, I picked up a turntable. I got a turntable for Christmas in 2016 and was really pretty bad at DJing. Obviously, I've never even touched a turntable before, but I didn't really have a lot of confidence and faith in myself to DJ um, well, I guess, until an old friend of mine also picked up the hobby, but he got very good at it, um, better than I did. But then, yeah, we were friends, so he would come over and teach me how to DJ. And so through him, I learned the basics of beat matching. Um, and because I already had I feel like I had the inclination of song selection. Like I feel like I was already good at selecting songs for a playlist. I just didn't know how to mix them. But at that point I had learned how to mix. So got pretty decent at it uh, in maybe like junior year of college, and then probably COVID actually during COVID 2020 there was nothing to do. It was the lockdown, and I wanted to make a mix because I wanted to like pretend like there was a party going on and I was DJing for it, or like a festival. I imagine because I missed festivals because they were all getting canceled, and I just wanted to pretend like I was playing at a festival during the COVID lockdowns. So I made a mix called Autoplay, and that was probably the best mix I had done. I think I already had like 6 or 7 mixes up until that point, but um, I was very, very happy with it. It's still on my SoundCloud. Um, and that was kind of like the point where I was like, okay, I can DJ pretty well now. Like I'm pretty confident in my abilities. And over the course of 4 years, I think I'm at 19 or 20 mixes on SoundCloud. So yeah, definitely enjoyed doing that and that process. Um, and my most recent mix is like a tech house mix that I think is like has like some really smooth transitions, and the mix just keeps the beat going the whole time, which is like what I was going for. Which happens in obviously in dance mixes. But I feel like there's like a pipeline that you go down. If you have the passion for it, you you could either start off producing and then end up DJing, or you start DJing and you end up producing. So I went down I started DJing and ended up producing route. Now I am at the point I've made 4 songs on Ableton. Um, the first 2 were not not good enough in my eyes to release, but the third one I released, and it's called Feel Like. It's on SoundCloud, and then I just finished making some last minute tweaks to another one. It's called Star Hop, and I don't know when that's going to be out, but it should be out soon. Um, I think this one, Star Hop, sounds significantly better, not just in terms of songwriting, but like production. Like the sounds are just more full and wider. Um, and I think I mixed it a little bit better, which is kind of what you're going for. And anytime you endeavor into a hobby, it's like each iteration of what you're doing is better than the last. So I think I am going in a good direction here. But I may come up with a song or try something that isn't isn't as good as what I already made, and then I would feel like I'm regressing. But that regression is just a layering of my perception of what's actually happening, which is I'm going through existence and there is no end to it. So it doesn't it doesn't actually matter what I label what I'm creating, because it's all just a part of the process of my existence. Um, and if I recognize the latter, then I don't have to judge what I've been making. But I feel like I haven't. That's interesting. I wanted to say I feel like I haven't been judging what I've been making, um, but there are little judgments that come up during my producing sessions where actually I'm not sure anymore, because when you're doing music production, like something that I really struggled with over my life is that I've always wanted to get into music production, but I've always had a lot of self doubt. Like I would watch my one best friend do it, and I'm just looking at him produce music, and he's just like doing all these different, noticing all these details about the sounds in the track, and to me, I'm like, this is too much. This is too much to pay attention to in order to get it sounding good. First of all, you have to think of the song. Like that's a lot of effort. And then you have to download all the samples or make your own samples. Even though from a starting perspective, it's easier to just download samples and put them into your tracks. But you have to select the samples. You have to know how the song is arranged. And then once you have like a basic beat going, then you have to like turn that into a full song. Like that's so much. Turning it into a full song, there's many steps wrapped up into that. It's like once you have the beat, then you have to make an arrangement and then add effects and instruments and then maybe automate those instruments and effects. Meanwhile, you're keeping in mind the stereo image of your track. So if you put everything in mono means one. So that means it's all gonna shoot down the middle. It's like you're just getting blasted by every sound from the front. But if you make certain sounds in stereo, then you can control which side the sound comes out of. So you can be the right or the left speaker. And kind of forget where I was going with that, but it's all stuff that you have to pay attention to if you want to produce like at a level that professional DJs and music producers produce at. Um, but when I'm going through this process, something that I realized that took a lot of the weight off of it was there's no pressure and there's no timeline and there's no deadline. It's like you can put down a little melody on a MIDI track and come up with, you can even download like a synthesizer preset which has like a preloaded sound that'll just play to the melody that you wrote in the MIDI track. Um, or you can go into the synthesizer and mess around with all of the little parameters and see how that changes the sound. And it's like if you realize that there is no rush and that you have all the time ever, then you can just play around with that sound until you find something that you like, that you enjoy. And I was watching a production stream from Chris Lake, actually. Chris Lake is a fantastic, one of my biggest inspirations for electronic music. Um, and he's kind of saying stuff during the stream. He was like dropping like wisdom, not just production tips, but just advice in general. And basically, he described it as like once you open up your production software, Ableton or whatever, it's like there's a million doors right in front of you. And what you do is you don't follow what people, all of the doors and sequences that people have gone through before. You choose any door, and it doesn't have to be because you think it's going to be a good door to go through or it's going to benefit you in some way. It's just that you're going to go through this door with really no intention other than maybe you enjoy going through doors, um, and just seeing what's next. Because if you take out the whole um, I this track needs to be good, this track needs to sound like this person, this track needs to do numbers on Spotify and SoundCloud, you take it out and all you are left with is just going through doors and seeing where they lead. Um, and now that'll take more time because you want to explore all the different doors you can go through. And once you go through one door, then there's another set of a million doors to go through. Um, and it's just maintaining that curiosity and the drive for whatever you're enthusiastic about. In my case, it's music production, and it's it like it's an inception almost. Like it builds on itself. Like you go through a million doors for the sound that you want to choose. You go through a million doors for how you want to modify and automate that sound. And then once you like the sound, there's another million doors with how you can put that sound into the track in a way that you think feels good. And when I'm listening to my tracks back, it's like I'm asking myself, do I like it? Does it make me want to dance? Um, and does it sound good? Because if I like it and if it makes me dance and if it sounds good, then what else is there to do? um, because the other side of my mind is like overthinking, overanalyzing. Maybe I could tweak this one sound here. Maybe I could tweak this one sound there. But once I just decide that this is the song and I release it, just like with my first song, Feel Like, it's out there and people will perceive the song just like they perceive me in the way that is appropriate to their experience. Um, and I realize that there's just unlimited, I get an unlimited amount of tries with producing music, and each release is a success because it's just that next step that I'm expressing. Um, but that was a big rabbit hole into like music production. To get back to my life, um, what I'm going through right now is like I want to call it an in between time because it's in between me living by myself. Like I was living by myself in Philly for the last year. and now I'm living with my parents, and then I'll be living by myself again in California. Um, and living with my parents is interesting because all of like the old habits of what I used to live like when I was at my parents kind of come back. Um, like in terms of like they do diet and health differently. So that came back when I came back to live with my parents, but I've kind of managed to, and I don't live like exactly like how I did when I was living alone, but I've certainly brought some of those habits and ways of living with me back to my parents. Um, like for example, I brought home beef tallow. Tallow is something that I've come to realize is a saturated fat, and it's pretty healthy. Um, because I learned recently that unsaturated fats have like a double bond in them that oxidizes and turns a cell into a free radical. But yeah, I've kind of maintained some of my habits um, while living at my parents' house. But yeah, I'm gonna cut it here and a little short episode for now, but I will certainly do another episode again. Maybe it'll probably be in California or next week. I don't know. Have a good one.